And welcome back to the Vintage Super League. We've got a huge night for VSL tonight. 3 elimination matches, 4 win-and-ins, and I've got the brass man here with me to set up the evening for you. How you doing, Andy?
I'm doing great, Randy. How are you?
I'm good. I'm excited. Now, I call these elimination matches. It's worth explaining how the format actually works, right? Mm-hmm. So we had 12 people who showed up a couple of weeks ago to try to win spots into the Vintage Super League. We had 5 spots available. So the way we set it up is double elimination tournament, and these are the brackets that you've been seeing if you've been watching at social media at all. Double elimination tournament for 4 spots. So 2 people from the winner's bracket, and you'll see there, we already know those 2 win-and-ins. Either David Williams or Steve Menendian is going to get into the league, well, back into the league in that case, and either Brian Kelly or Paul Rietzel is going to win that match and be some fresh blood coming up in the next season. So 2 win-and-ins already set from this double elimination bracket. And then if you look at the loser's bracket, things are starting to flesh out. You'll see that either Caleb or Bob is going to earn themselves a win-and-in. You can see that Tom and Shuhei, that's actually going to be our first match, have some work to do to get to that win-and-in, but 2 of these guys are eventually going to win spots tonight as well. So that's 4 spots. I said there were 5. We've got 1 spot left, and if you think about it, we started with 12 guys, and then 4 of them are going to win spots through this double elimination bracket, so we're just going to run an 8-man single elim next week for the last spot. Which is good news for you, Andy Probasco, because your name's in red right there.
It's exciting news for me. This tournament format, it's not what people are used to, but I kind of like it. I mean, you have day 1, a lot of great matches on day 1, but since then, almost every match you see is life or death. Either the winner makes it or the loser gets knocked out. It's action the whole time. I think it's a great way to run things.
Yeah, I agree with both points, I guess. It does feel like it's a little unusual, but it basically boils down to triple elimination. Right? It basically, you get to keep playing, and either you lose 3 times or you win a spot in the league. The details, I'm happy with the way we set the details up. I think that it's kind of the most fair and the most sort of, I don't want to use the word elegant because I'm not sure it counts as elegant, but I don't know. I like brackets. I am going to use the word elegant. I think it's the right way to set it up.
It's elegant.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah.
So it does mean, though, that next week we say elimination match. We're going to start out, either Tom or Shuhei is going to be eliminated from the double elimination portion of the tournament. But there is that last chance qualifier. So next week, whatever 8 people didn't earn a spot, come back, new decks, so fresh deck lists.
Yeah, I think that's going to be really interesting to see if people change their decks at all, if they play the same deck, if they try to adjust to what other people played or try to second guess people and adjust the adjustment. The 2 tournaments back to back like that, I think it'll be really interesting. I haven't decided what I'm playing yet. I
was going to say I didn't want to put you on the spot, but I am curious.
No, I have not decided. I have a couple options, but I'm really curious as to the thought process of everyone. You kind of get to see that. Did I pick the best deck the first time, and do I stick by it? No one who's in the single elim won, so everyone has to have some second thoughts.
Fair.
But do they, stick it out or try to completely change the meta? Is anyone going to play one of the decks that won? That would be fascinating, right? If someone just took one of the 3-0 decks and just played exactly that. I guess I would sort of love to see that. It would be, it'll be interesting to see what people do.
I do feel like we just plain know more about Vintage now than we did 3 weeks ago. Right? If you think about it, the fact that VSL has happened has certainly added some to the people's understanding of this new Vintage. It's still a relatively fresh format. I feel like we're still sort of grappling with the true impact of Lodestone Golem getting restricted. And then that Bizarre Moxen tournament with Scab Clan Berserker 5-color humans winning it. Paul Rietzel 2-0. Well, I guess Paul Rietzel in a win-and-in with, what I think of as, from an archetype point of view, a not entirely dissimilar sort of a base white hate bears.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Is that what you're supposed to do? Are those decks actually good matchups against Mentor?
Well, it's tough to say because Mentor, I'm not going to say Mentor's underplayed in the VSL. There's still 3 Mentor decks out of 12 people. That's not underplayed, but less people are playing it here than in the larger paper or online events. But that doesn't mean it's a bad matchup or a good matchup.
Yeah, that's probably slightly less than what we're seeing on Magic Online right now, but at the same time, I feel like the mentor percentages have been steadily dropping over the last couple of weeks as people figure out, okay, there's a couple of different versions of shops you can play. You can go to Hate Bears. You can go to Doomsday and Storm. I don't know. I feel like we know more now, but at the same time, I don't feel like it's solved. So,
I totally agree with that. I think things are changing pretty rapidly every week, and everyone now, in addition to the information about the format, everyone now has a huge piece of information they didn't have 3 weeks ago, which is what did these people play 3 weeks ago? That's and how did those decks do against each other? And that's you can't get that anywhere but here. So we'll see.
No, that's a good point. Now,
we'll
to be clear, you're not going to know the pairings ahead of time, right? You're not going to know what the bracket actually looks like, but then again, it's single elim, and there's only 7 human beings that are joining you in the bracket, so it probably is worth figuring. All right, Reed's probably got a big chunk of Storm in his distribution of possible decks, and interesting. Yeah, so you'll have some work to do.
Absolutely.
At this point, it's you, Reed, and Nick Koss so far who have been eliminated from the double elim, coming back next week. We will have 5 players joining you. Five more names will turn red by the end of this evening.
Which is exciting and terrifying for all parties involved. Looking forward to see it. Is tonight, are we going to have all the... well, I guess if everyone who is in the single elim has been determined, then that means everyone who made their wins to the top 4 is also determined. So that's going to be really interesting to see.
Yeah, it's actually going to be the biggest night we've had in terms of Vintage Super League. We're going to have 7 matches. Hopefully we're not up too late. New start time will help a little bit with that. But yeah, we'll start with 3 elimination matches. So I think we've got the schedule. I mean, there's a lot of matches. It is fully 7. Shuhei and Tom are up first. And then the loser of that is out. That'll be the second loss for whoever loses that matchup. The winner of that, it gets paired up against Kai, which will play in match number 3. So you see winner of match number 1. That's whoever survives Tom versus Shuhei, just drops down to play Kai. The winner of that earns a win-in, right? But they drop all the way down to winner match 3 in the 7th match of the night. So Bob versus Caleb is once again, okay, can you earn yourself a win-in? Whoever wins between Bob and Caleb, well, they become the winner of match number 2, and they slot down into that win-in, which will be 6th up this evening. So yeah, 3 matches where the loser is out, has to go to the single elim next week. Then those 2 winners bracket matchups like Paul, Steve, Brian, and David, they haven't lost yet. Those guys are undefeated, and they basically get back-to-back win-ins. So win the first one, you're just in. Lose it, though, you drop to the loser's bracket where you get a second crack at it.
Yeah, it'll be really interesting to see which decks sweep the whole tournament and which decks fight it out in the last round.
We should talk about Tom and Shuhei. That's going to be our first matchup up tonight. Now, I know that Tom is on the Mentor deck, which is relatively similar to the one you played.
Mm-hmm. Yep. I mean... There's a lot of similarities with all the Mentor decks. The biggest difference between Tom's list and mine is he's running some Young Pyromancers, and I'm running some Mystic Remoras. And you can kind of tell those are sort of opposite ends of the spectrum as far as what they're good against.
Sure.
But Young Pyromancer is absolutely proven. I think part of the feeling behind that card is, I like Mentor so much, I wanted to run 6. It's not... it's not the 5th Mentor, but it's not far off. He's also got a lot of removal main deck, which I think it's pretty typical with Mentor lists right now. I think this looks a lot like what we've been seeing online, which I don't think is a bad choice.
Yeah, no, Jeskai Mentor is the most played deck on Magic Online right now for Vintage. I mean, you can haggle over the details, like you say, Mr. Kimura, do you want Pyros in the main deck? What's your mix of plows and bolts? But the basic engine here, sort of, relatively low land count, tons and tons of cantrips to just explode whenever you get a Mentor onto the table. That sort of small blue deck, that sort of cheap cantrip fueled blue deck is definitely... I don't know if it's the boogeyman right now. Maybe it is. Some people, I think, are getting a little sick of it. Some people are like, it's just the current best deck. Give us some time. We'll figure it out.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think you want to go to a tournament and not have a game plan for it.
Yes, that is
for
fair.
sure.
Now, it seems to me, correct me if you think I'm wrong, that Shuhei has a pretty good game plan against Mentor. The card Oath of Druids seems pretty well positioned if your opponent's plan is to summon a creature and then win a couple of turns later.
Of course, yes. Like a resolved Oath of Druids versus a resolved Mentor isn't really close, right? And the Young Pyromancers that Tom has is even more so the case, because sometimes Mentor can win in one turn. Pyromancer has a little more trouble with that. It is interesting to see how similar their decks are, despite the fact that on the surface, an Oath deck and a Mentor deck are so very different, but they're running a lot of the key cards in the matchup are really similar, right? They're both running lots of Flusterstorms and Forces and Mental Missteps and Preordains. But I think that Oath of Druids is going to give him a big edge against Mentors, but I think the gushes that Tom has are going to give him, he's got more ways to draw than Shuhei does, and I think that's going to help Tom.
Gotta love the deck list, right?
Yeah. So Shuhei's deck he played not that long ago in was it the Asian Vintage Championship?
Yes, exactly. This is the list that he won that tournament with, which is why we invited him.
Yeah, and the obviously the source of this deck was our other competitor Brian Kelly's deck.
Indeed, it is. I haven't checked to see if it's card for card identical to the deck Brian used to win the Vintage Champs with, but it's at least close if it's not card for card.
I think Brian had 2 dig through times at the Champs, but it's still very similar, right? It wasn't a 4 dig through time deck. This deck wasn't impacted too much from the from that restriction. This is not a deck you see very often online because the Auriok Salvagers combo is tough to do online, but it's not a problem in the VSL. And the Salvagers Oath is a really interesting deck. It's an Oath deck and it has all the strengths of an Oath deck, but it doesn't have some of the weaknesses. It doesn't just lose to a Grafdigger's Cage. Sometimes you can just Oath up an Auriok Salvagers and cast it, which is not the kind of thing you do very often with a deck full of Griselbrands.
Yeah, how much of a difference do you think that actually makes in terms of an Oath build? Because, I mean, I definitely hear people talk about, Salvager's Oath is just better because you can summon an Auriok Salvagers. You don't have to rely on cheating in it to play with Oath of Druids. You can just tap 4 mana, put him onto the table, and then your combo kill is turned on. Do you think that's just a huge change in the way Oath plays out? Or just like a cute little wrinkle that comes up every once in a while?
I don't think it's huge. I think it does make a difference. I think Griselbrand is just so strong, it's worth sitting around and trying to get 8 mana to cast it if you can.
Okay.
And a lot of the decks that run just Griselbrands also might run 2 to 3 show and tells. You're not totally lost on your ability to get into play. But I think Brian has a history, and lots of Vintage players have a history of playing the decks that they can play the control role better. I think Brian is totally happy playing this deck without ever seeing an Oath of Druids, and I bet Shuei's in the same boat. That's one advantage of it. You don't need to rely on that. But is it entirely different? No. I mean, most games you're going to play an Oath, and your opponent is going to be able to deal with that or not. And I think that's the same for both versions of the deck.
Yeah. No copies of Show and Tell in this list. So his backup plan, if he can't Oath, is very much summoning the Auriok Salvagers. I see David Williams pointing out in the chat, though, we have seen Mentor decks just swarm through and around a Griselbrand. Like, I wasn't trying to ask a rhetorical question when I say, is this just a great matchup against Mentor? Because I feel like historically Oath has been crazy good against, Delver decks, Young Pyromancer decks. Oath is just, should show both sides of your hand. But the Mentor is actually explosive enough that I feel like sometimes you can steal a game even through an active Oath.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I think one of Oath's big advantages in this matchup is not necessarily that Oath beats Mentor, but that Oath Orchard comes down very quickly. It doesn't get Mental Misstep or Flusterstormed. If you're sitting on an Oath of Druids with no Orchard out for a few turns, the Mentor player knows that. He doesn't have to just run the Mentor in there unless he knows that he can win that turn with a Time Walker, knows that he can make enough creatures to attack through Griselbrand next turn. Yeah, I absolutely agree. It's certainly not that a result that Mentor can't win through Resolved Oath. And both decks have a decent amount of Planeswalkers. I've definitely seen Jaces win the game from both of these decks, so that's certainly worth considering. Whereas an Oath sits around and maybe does nothing, but the Mentor always does something.
Fair.
I like Mentor in this matchup. I like being on Gushes and having all proactive aggressive cards, but it's not close. Like it's not like a blowout by any means. Anything could happen. Very easy for an Oath deck to just draw a couple counters in an Oath on the first turn or two. And the meta player has to be prepared for that.
I feel like my instinct is I want to be on the Oath of Druids side of this matchup. I mean, both because, land mocks, Oath of Druids can come down blisteringly fast, and also because of their creatures sometimes turning on your Oath. But if Oath actually had an edge in this matchup, wouldn't we see more of it? Like, we don't see all that much Oath out there in the wild right now. This is not a heavily played deck.
It's true. I think some of that, Oath has this strange history of sort of being off the radar and then winning a giant tournament. It's done that time and time again. But I'm not sure it's not an automatic foil. I'm more afraid of the Doomsday deck that I lost to than I am an Oath deck in general. But that doesn't mean it's a pleasant matchup. I do see that Tom is. I would be more comfortable if I had more Containment Priests in this matchup. I think that card's really big, and Tom has one. One isn't bad, and he has the one Wear and Tear. Yeah, one Containment Priest, one Wear Tear, and he has other things he could board in. I mean, there's relevant things to do with Graveyard.
He's on 4 Cage. Is his big plan?
Yeah, but Cage is worse against this list, and I'm not as big a fan of it in general, but it's still relevant. There's so many different ways to sideboard in this matchup. I would not presume to know that I know the right way to sideboard in this matchup, and I definitely want to see what Tom does. That will make a difference. And we'll look at this again, obviously, after game 1. Looks like Shui has lots of Pyroblasts and Mindbreak traps, which can't hurt. Probably a balance, too, which isn't too bad against a board full of monks.
Oh, right. Yeah, the balance could totally be a matchup where the balance actually matters. I think we do have a delay while we get the match ready, so normally I'd be sending you down to the action right now, but it does look like the players are a little bit late in getting set up. But we'll get you there.
Are there any other decks you want to take a look at? There have been a lot of exciting decks this tournament. I don't know if you want to, for anyone who's tuning in for the first time, first of all, why? You should have been paying attention. But if you have been, there's lots of really interesting stuff. Is there anything?
Look, for me, the craziest storyline, the most fun storyline going on right now is Rietzel. Right? It's got to be Paul's White Weenie deck, and he gets 2 straight win-ins with this.
Yeah, and they didn't look close. I think
true.
Yeah, it was somewhat effortless. Not every game, but some of the games. This is not a deck we've seen in the VSL. It is a deck that people play in Vintage, though certainly not this exact configuration. But I wouldn't say it's a super popular list. Thalia is a beast.
Yeah, that's the best card in this list, right? I mean, the best non-restricted card anyway.
Yeah, I would say so. And not just the fact that it's very good anyway. It's obviously the whole deck is built to take advantage of Thalia. There's very few cards that are slowed down by it in the list. It puts on a lot of pressure very fast. It is a tiny lodestone golem, right? That's what it is. There's a lot of I know a lot of workshop players who have told me that this is basically the all creature aggro decks are like the scariest matchup because their whole deck is built on stopping things on the stack. And when you have a deck that's 100% board control, it's some people aren't prepared to play that game in Vintage, right? And if you're not prepared to play that game, you're going to lose to it.
Yeah, Paul's paired against Brian Kelly, and I was talking to Brian a little bit at the end of the show last week. Brian is nervous about this matchup. Like he's legit worried that those Hate Bear decks, they're a problem for him historically. And I really like Brian's take on Mentor. I think the Dark Mentor, Esper Mentor, whatever you want to call it, is a clever way to sort of take the Mentor deck but give it this extra dimension. I know he's got the ability to have a Tendrils kill. He's only got 2 Mentors, but at the same time, he's got to deal with Paul. Yeah, here you see Brian's list. I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on this list, actually, while we're here.
Yeah, sure. I mean, obviously, I decided to go a different way, but I totally get why he's running the cards that he is, and it makes full sense to me. And for the same reason I'm running Mystic Remora as a sort of way of saying, hey, this is a card that gives me an edge in a mirror. Dark Confidant's a very similar card. I don't know Brian too well, but I know that he prefers to take the control role in a match, and Dark Confidant is a card that lets you do that. The game keeps on going. You're gonna generate this advantage over time. And he obviously likes having options. There's a lot of very flexible cards in the deck. The Repeal, the Sabotage. Is this instance listed twice?
Yeah, the instances are listed twice. Sorry about that.
1 out of 16. I'm curious what the difference is. But it doesn't matter. Yeah.
So I will say, I'm looking forward to this matchup between Brian and Paul, partially because Paul's deck is really interesting to see, can he keep winning with that deck? Is that deck sort of real, quote unquote? But I also think Paul himself has been fun to watch.
Like, sure.
Paul, this is a guy who doesn't really know Vintage, but I mean, he's a Hall of Fame Magic player. He's won Pro Tours. He's got all these top 8s. He's in the Hall of Fame. So the guy knows Magic super, super well. He plays a ton of Magic online, but he's not really played a ton of Vintage. So I've just enjoyed, and I mean, this comes through in his commentary. I think it comes through when you look at that deck list, right? Here's super smart Magic mind just coming to the format with fresh eyes and just watching Paul sort of figure out what matters and how things work and try things and see if he can win with them. And, his baseline strategy is attack for 2. Great. He'll apply that to this new format. And I think it's just been really fun watching Paul sort of go through that process. And I mean, I'm sure we would get to see more of that if he does actually win a spot in the league. I mean, either one of those guys are great to have in the league.
And we don't just get to see him sort of discover the format through his deck list and his play. We literally get to see him after the match talking out, discovering the format right in front of us, watching the other matches that he might not even play against and seeing interactions for the first time and his reaction to them. Yeah, I totally agree. It's been great.
Yeah, and he was paired with Reed Duke doing commentary 2 weeks ago, and I paired them up again. So if you enjoyed Paul and Reed, I heard you. I've got them paired up later in the day, so you can get. Reed doesn't get to play today. He's one of the guys who's already been sort of relegated into that single elim next week, but he was happy to hang out and do a round of commentary, so we will get that later as well. Certainly hoping to get you Magic. Yeah, the problem is Shuhei's having connection issues from Japan, so we do not have Shuhei in a position where he can actually play right now, unfortunately.
All right, so we went over some of the Mentor decks. We could talk about mine, but it's basically just the same as Tom's. We're seeing don't worry about it. in a broad sense, I guess we're seeing 4 Gush aggro decks if we want to lump Delver and Mentor together, and they're definitely different decks, but they're closer together than
they're
some
like
of the other lists.
Row decks or something. Like they're all like intellectual descendants of Miracle Grow.
Yeah, and then we have I want to say there's just the 2 workshop decks, which we haven't really talked about.
2 workshop decks, 2 very different takes on workshop, but
yeah, it's neat to see. I mean, that's one of the narratives going into the event is, there's a lot of Mentor online. Is that what everyone's going to play? Another narrative is, did Workshop survive the change? And it's great to see 2 obviously very, very good players kind of ask themselves that question. How are they answering that question? Which is like, how does Stack survive? And I like seeing the 2 different answers. I like Kai's list, which basically tries to go as lock heavy as possible. Right? He knows he doesn't have the lodestones anymore, so he's just going to run all the spheres, all the tangle wires, try and make up for that. Whereas Bob's deck is sort of a different approach, where he kind of tackles the other side of Lodestone Golem, which is that it's a 5/3 creature, it's a fast clock. So Bob takes the lock pieces and he adds a new fast clock, which is a 20/20 that costs no mana, which is about as fast as you get. And it's neat to see both of those decks in action.
All right. We're having trouble getting Shuhei lined up to play. I don't know. I guess there's some chance he's going to be an hour late, so we're trying to sort of scramble the schedule and see if we can get a different match ready. I mean, obviously because of the bracket, it's tricky, right? Tom needs to play Shuhei. The winner of that needs to play Kai. I guess the other side of the bracket is what? Caleb
and Bob.
Caleb and Bob. Like. So yeah, when Caleb and Bob get here, we can obviously just have the two of them play, but they weren't supposed to be up just yet, so they aren't here. We may have an exhibition match to bring you guys. Yeah, if Reed's around, I'm sure people would love to watch him try to make that Storm deck work some more. Call it play testing for next week, right? The one other matchup that we do know, we've talked about Paul versus Brian. The other match on the winners bracket side is two of our two people trying to get their way back into VSL. David Williams will be paired against Stephen Menendian. We know that matchup is going to happen. It's going to be Landstill against Doomsday. A couple of decks that both strike me as pretty reasonable decks for this metagame.
Yeah, and I want to say Landstill was the deck that out of all the decks that people ended up playing, where when I saw the lists, Landstill was the deck where I most said, "Oh God, I forgot about that." Right? I thought Doomsday's always an option for Steven, but Landstill I totally missed it. It's fine. I think it's a strong choice right now, and I was not prepared for it. And I guess I'm kind of glad that I didn't get paired against it before. Trying to pull up that list right now to see. I'm sure whoever covers it will talk about it later, but he's got tons of counters. That's what Landstill does. Tons of counters and tons of draw, which is not a bad position to be in against Doomsday.
Yeah, you also get tons of land. Like having 20 land, including 4 wasteland, is part of the reason I like this deck in this current meta. He's only got the 2 basics. You don't have to worry quite as much about enemy shops decks nowadays. Still a little bit, but I love being able to attack the other guy's land with the full package: 4 wastes, a strip, and 2 crucibles hanging out in the artifact slot.
And a lot of people are sort of hanging back a little on lands because they're not afraid of shops, right? They think, oh, shops is either people are going to play it or they don't think it's as good anymore, so they play a little looser with their mana base, and you can punish them for that. You don't have to be on shops to punish them for that. There's lots of ways of doing that, and Landstill's a really good one.
Yeah, and oh, by the way, you see the 2 Monastery Mentors. We haven't really been calling this a mentor deck because it's more the, oh, by the way, win condition. Like, this is very much a Landstill shell, and it's just those are the 2 most efficient win conditions you can find. It's a good list.
Yeah, I'd say the lack of Gush makes it different enough from the other mentor decks to
right.
treat it differently.
This is not a cheap blue cantrip fueled deck. This is much more counter spells, right? This is the control version of blue. This is mana drains instead of attacks. So it does look like we are going to have an exhibition match for you. It's hard to move the bracket on without Shuhei. I mean, look, if Shuhei doesn't show up by 6 o'clock Pacific time, we probably are just going to have to award Tom that win and let Tom advance through to play against Kai. But I'm willing to give Shuhei an hour to try to get connected and get here before we move on without him. In the meantime, we're going to play an exhibition match. We are going to have Reed Duke taking on Rich Shea.
Ooh.
So just for fun, but it's a pretty tasty little matchup we got for you.
All right.
Don't know what decks they're going to play.
We have no idea. It's not. Because Rich wasn't. Yes, so it could be anything.
Rich wasn't even in the field. Like, I have a guess as to what deck Reed is going to play, but we'll see. Rich, who knows? So, that is not too far away. We'll get that up for you in a couple minutes. And then, hopefully Shuhei can get here. Like I said, I'm willing to give him another 45 minutes to get connected before we award that match to Tom, who is here and ready to play. But meanwhile, we do have one real match we can play before we resolve that and before we get to the win and in. So if we get Caleb and Bob lined up to play after the exhibition match, that should get us off to the races. So it's Vintage Super League, right? Everybody likes bonus magic. Let's play some bonus magic.
I'm excited about it.
Just need a sec.
All right, so we have to assume that we're gonna see some Storm in a minute.
Yeah, I'm gonna put Rich on Sylvan Mentor.
I think you're probably right. He's been playing that a lot recently, unless he plays something totally strange, just to confuse our viewers. But
he's probably got some counter slaver build he's been working on in the secret lab.
I would love to see someone mind slaved. that would be wonderful. The Sylvan Mentor deck has been doing pretty well, and no one played it in the play-in.
Right.
There was always a chance Brian Kelly was going to. He's been doing well with it too. But that's a mentor list that runs Sylvan Library. That's Sylvan Mentor. And a bunch of other control-ish cards, a slightly more control-ish version than the version with red.
I'm really interested to see, I want to see Storm and Mentor fight too. I feel like that is a matchup which, in my head, it's a skill matchup, right? I think that if you look at the percentages of how people do in general, I think Mentor decks tend to win more, but I feel like the good Storm pilot can beat the average Mentor pilot.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think, and I think this is the way most matchups are, but I think there's this tiny little rock, paper, scissors matchup going on in there where if the Mentor player decides I'm going to beat Storm and I'm going to use 4 Flusterstorms and 4 Missteps and 4 I don't know, Remoras, yeah, and then the Storm player says, all right, I'm just going to main deck 4 defense grids, then the Storm player destroys him. But then if the Storm player main decks 4 defense grids and the Mentor player is, say, Brian Kelly, and he brings in a bunch of duresses, and you're just running defense grids that do nothing into duresses, then suddenly the Mentor player has the advantage. And none of these are going to be a blowout, but I think there's a lot of really tiny decisions you can make with your deck. Not changing your archetype, but just tiny little tweaks that change the matchup quite a bit.
Yeah, that is a good point. I mean, whether the right weapons against duresses and Flusterstorms are definitely different. Yeah, maybe that's the right way to look at it. And maybe another reason why maybe Brian has the right build of Mentor right now. Mm-hmm. I mean, you do see a fair amount of Storm out there. But between Storm and Doomsday, it feels like those are the 2 combo decks people are playing right now, and they're not as popular as Mentor or Workshop decks, but they're the next tier down.
Yeah, if I was expecting a very heavy combo metagame and I wanted to play Mentor, I think I would be running black. I really like having access to duress against a deck that can. It's not like they're unprepared for Flusterstorm. They know you have it. They have a plan for it. So it's nice to have that option against them.
All right, we are almost ready. I did want to let people know that we will have an Eternal Masters preview card next week. So next week is WotC's big Eternal Masters preview week. I know that lots of people are going to have lots of cards all over the internet. But we're on the list. Both Vintage Super League and also Community Super League, for that matter, are going to have Eternal Masters preview cards next week. So stay tuned for that. Nothing this week. I don't think anybody gets any preview cards this week, but next week we'll have some cards. Community Super League will as well. And I mean, if you guys don't know about Community Super League, that show has now started up on Thursdays. Has been a lot of fun. Kind of the opposite end of the spectrum from the vintage formats, and we're playing some crazy formats. It's a new format every week. This week is actually Brewers Challenge. So standard decks built around some of the more obscure build around me cards in Standard right now, which I think is going to be a lot of fun to watch on Thursday. I'm certainly looking forward to see what everybody comes up with. But yeah, check that show out on this channel on Twitch/Magic.
Yeah, I've been following the community league. It's a lot of fun.
It is, right?
It's really great to see crazy formats, just crazy formats. And every week it's totally different. It's worth watching.
Awesome. Well, time for some bonus magic. Let's head down to see Reed Duke take on Rich Shea. Hello and welcome to a bonus match of Magic. Dr. the Atog Lord on the top of your screen. Love the circle pick. Does appear like he's got a mentor list of some kind.
It could be anything. It could be.
It's a look, it's a small blue deck, right? Well, and Reed looks like he's on a Storm list.
Storm.
So far, so good. I see the Tropical Island. I'm still on Sylvan Mentor. All right.
A fun hand for Reed. He's got no blue mana, but if that vamp maybe hits a Tolarian Academy, he's got an interesting next turn.
Oh, that is the target, isn't it? He's going to vamp main phase because he wants to make sure he resolves it. Goes ahead, dumps his Moxes. Doesn't actually know what he's up against, so some of this is preemptive in case if Rich is going to drop a Thorn of Amethyst or something. Mm-hmm. It's got to be Tolarian Academy, right? As the mentor, I
would guess. I mean, it could be any number of things. It's worth noting if he drops the Moxes now, he can play around a Flusterstorm. If he played them on his turn, he wouldn't have the mana to stop the Flusterstorm, which is a mistake I make all the time. I always hold back the Moxes and then add to my opponent's Storm count.
Now, Rich gets to see what he's up against. And there's not really a whole lot he can do about it. I guess he knows what to look for with Preordain.
Yeah, so the first Gitaxian Probe got Mental Misstep. This one's on the stack. I think Reed's deciding if he wants to counter this one. Of course, if he does, Rich has a third Gitaxian Probe, so he's going to see that hand. But Reed has to decide whether it's worth it or not. This is interesting because he wants Rich to have as many cards in hand as possible when that Windfall resolves.
It's true.
But he also wants the Windfall to resolve, right? All right, so Rich definitely not on Doomsday without Lightning Bolt.
Yeah, it doesn't want to cast the Probe because I think that's his blue card for Force of Will. I think Rich wants to Preordain into a Force of Will here. I mean, he could leave up blue mana as some sort of Flusterstorm bluff, but it's not going to work. I mean, he probably knows that Reed went and got an Academy too. Oh, so he uses the Probe, but does find a blue card. So Preordaining into Force of Will is still live.
Yeah, but that Preordain's too juicy a target for the misstep. Yep, there goes the Academy. There goes the Windfall.
So both players, it's even, right? Both players draw 5 cards. Totally fair card.
Totally
fair card right there. Reed finds a Ponder. His Storm count is only at 2 because he saved all his Moxes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that Ponder's going to run into a misstep, and Reed is going to fizzle.
He has Lethal Tendrils.
What?
No, he didn't play land this turn. I was thinking you could play the Underground.
Oh, Rich is down to 11. Good grief.
Yeah. There's a lot of Gitaxian Probes.
Wow, you're right. That would be lethal. He doesn't have the second black mana.
Yeah, but he doesn't have the black mana.
He can't both imprint the Tendrils and cast the Tendrils. And he used his land drop for the turn on the Tolarian Academy. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, this is super close. I was thinking he fizzled, but I didn't notice Rich was at 11. He just ran out of black mana.
So, yeah, I think he may have played that Chrome Mox bluffing the Tendrils, which is not a bad call. Rich could have forced that. If Reed had a second black card in his hand, then he would have won. Then he wins by playing the Chrome Mox there. So I think it's reasonable to think Rich might force there. But Rich didn't, and that's really good for him because now Reed's hand is not so pretty.
Crazy. That's a super awesome bluff from Reed, though. I was trying to figure out why he was playing the Mana Crypt into the Chrome Mox, but yeah, I think you're exactly right. He was representing a Tendril skill.
Yeah, when you have... I mean, he doesn't have a lot of outs around, right? So he kind of has to play to those tiny little edges, because that's the only thing he can do.
Well, look, he could have kept the Crypt and the Chrome Mox to build up to a future baby Tendrils.
That's true. He would only need
a couple of spells, right?
Yeah, just like 3 spells. It obviously didn't work out well for him with the dig resolving right now. That's pretty good for Rich. Ooh, Ancestral Pyroblast.
So how does Reed win from here? He just doesn't, right?
Probably not, but I mean, he's got the Tendrils in hand, right? If he just draws... If Rich has a very slow hand and Reed just draws, spell, Storm beats counters. But Reed would have to get pretty lucky and Rich would have to get pretty unlucky. Plus, Rich has the Flusterstorm. So one of those cards he draws would have to be an answer to Flusterstorm. I wonder if Rich is just going to wait him out on that Mana Crypt.
Victory condition acquired.
I wonder if it would be right for Rich to just run the Snapcaster Mage out at the end of Reed's turn. I feel like I'm always like super conservative with that sort of thing, but he's got 7 cards in his hand. He's got plenty of draw spells.
I think Ancestral with Pyroblast and Misstep available to defend it is better. And now next turn you can snap back the Ancestral if you want to.
I mean, he's going to discard 2 cards. He just drew 1 card off that Ancestral. But I mean, it's the conservative play, and it's not like Reed's putting pressure on, so he still gets the next Ancestral now. Yeah, I mean, Reed's hand isn't bad considering, but Rich just has so many counters. That is a lot of cards. But this is kind of what makes Storm so scary to play against it from a control player, because Rich has this crazy hand, but Storm puts things on the stack. It doesn't...
Thing in the ice?
Ooh!
What is the thing in Rich's hand right now?
Thing in the ice and an Arayo.
Okay.
That is
this appears to be straight blue-red. This isn't even a Mentor deck, right? This is...
Yeah. I suspect, the Thing in the Ice makes you suspect he does not have Mentor anywhere in the list.
Well, down goes Tolarian Academy.
Huh.
Cool list.
Yeah, Thing of the Ice is a card I haven't gotten it to work yet myself, but I really want it to. And I suspect there are a lot of ways to play with it that I haven't tried yet. So I kind of want to see it do well. It's just neat. It's a neat new card.
Yeah, card's cool. It does seem like it's at a power level that is relevant to Vintage too. Mm-hmm. I don't know if it's good, but it's definitely relevant. Also, Arayo's been around forever and all of a sudden is starting to sneak into these lists. What is up with the resurgence and Soratami Ascendance?
That is true. It's certainly you see more of it now than you've seen, since Kamigawa.
That was like 10 years ago.
Yeah, that kind of thing happens in Vintage. It's just pretty neat. These cards come out of nowhere. Someone tries them for the first time and discovers them. And
wow, now wait a minute. Rich is tapped out of blue mana. So Flusterstorm defenses are down.
That's true.
And Reed is now kind of in a go for it or use it or lose it scenario.
Yeah, and the way Reed's hand is, he could easily afford to lose one of those one of those rituals without hurting him.
Now, if Reed plays out his entire hand, it's actually only a tendrils for 10. But Rich is probably going to stick a mental misstep or force of will pointed at something, right?
I suspect, yeah.
This is actually a pretty interesting finish to this.
So he's got triple black.
Yeah.
The first spell he casts gets countered.
He's got threshold.
Or did Arayo flip? No, Arayo hasn't flipped.
Arayo has not flipped.
Oh, okay. So that's makes things much simpler.
And Gitaxian Probe just resolved, right? So now he knows exactly what he's up against.
Yeah, that's going to be...
win this game? What just happened, Rassman?
This is... Storm can do this. It's scary. If Rich counters at the right times, and Rich has every chance of doing that,
you sure?
He'll still be fine. But if he waits too long or goes for it too early, he will not get there. So Rich has 2 force of wills and 1 misstep, depending on how he pitches.
Yeah. So Reed has 3 black mana right now. If Rich counters both the Dark Ritual and the Cabal Ritual, then Reed will not have a second black.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you saw Reed start to go for that Cabal Ritual, but now he's a little nervous, right? The Storm mechanic works in his favor. Like getting into a permission fight is great. If Rich wants to start countering his stuff, that kind of works out in Reed's favor because it's extra Storm count for the tendrils, but only if he preserves double black. Yeah. And what Reed really wants to do is he wants to cast a Duress. But now
if Reed can resolve that one of those 2 rituals without tapping the Underground Sea,
yeah, he wins.
It might work out. But obviously that's not a guarantee at this point. And I think Rich, I think he counters the Dark Ritual with a misstep easily.
Yeah, so Reed is going to go for Time Walk, and now, worst case scenario, he gets to untap and go for it again. Or at least that's what he's thinking. Interesting. Rich
just looking at the force.
Oh. He's going to force a will now.
That doesn't look that bad.
Is Rich going to force a will Cabal Ritual? That is the crucial question. If Reed resolves that Cabal Ritual, doesn't he just win?
I think so.
Rich needs to force a will Cabal Ritual exactly.
Now,
I guess to be fair, I'm assuming he's going to misstep Dark Ritual.
Yeah, and
I think Reed's going to go for the Cabal Ritual first, which I think is correct.
Well, that flips right there.
So what happens when she flips?
So it'll do nothing for Reed this turn, but basically it's an enchantment that says whenever an opponent casts their first spell of a turn, it gets countered.
Okay, so Reed flipping it doesn't hurt him right now, but for future turns, his first spell gets countered.
It'll be real hard for him if he doesn't win right now, but he already knew that, right? That doesn't change anything.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was thinking I missed the Gitaxian Probe. If Cabal Ritual was the 3rd spell, then Rich almost definitely Force of Wills it just to flip his own Arayo, no matter what it is.
Funny.
But since it was the 4th spell, that wasn't really a factor. All right, so he's got the...
So Rich does Force of Will Cabal Ritual, and now he's got Misstep to cover Dark Ritual, and Reed has the Storm count he needs, but does not have the double black. The same problem he had on the Windfall turn. He's just going to be short the black mana he needs. I mean, he doesn't actually need to resolve a Dark Ritual. He just needs a second black mana of any kind.
Yeah.
And his only way to get it is with the Dark Ritual.
Which is interesting because I think if Rich doesn't strip mine his Academy, Reed would have been able to play the Time Walk. Like you were just saying a few minutes ago, those strip effects right now, not that bad.
Good point. Wow, Reed 1 black mana away on 2 different turns from winning this game. That is the power of Storm.
So if Reed loses the flip, he just has to play the Tendrils to buy himself 1 turn. Yep. Oh.
Hello. Wait a minute. That resolves. That card is just going to resolve. Reed's going to lead with it, thinking it's going to get countered, and then he can go ritual.
He knows Rich's hand except for the thing in the ice, right? He saw the force.
He feeds it countered by the Bio.
This eats misstep.
But then Dark Ritual Tendrils.
Yeah.
Misstep is the 5th spell.
Well, he takes the misstep with the duress. So.
So now this is only 4 spells?
Yep, but it's going to 1.
Oh no, it's only 4 spells.
But it buys him at least 1 more turn. Wow. It's very close.
Oh my god, this game.
And I'm not sure. We don't have Reed's list this time. I don't know how it's changed. I don't know what he has. I mean, a Yawgmoth's will.
Yes, Yawg will off the top. He might have a couple turns depending on how lucky he is with the Mana Crypt flips. Yeah. Survived that turn. Yeah, he's like, great black mana. Where were you when I...
and then there's flip to Ryo, though. So Yawgmoth's will doesn't even resolve. Rich comes back with this. I think that's it. Because any spell redraws gets countered by a Ryo.
That was close.
Yeah, that was exciting. I mean, he could have drawn a very slightly different card and won that.
Guess what? Shuhei is here.
Awesome.
Shuhei is here. He apologizes for being late. Kai has wished him a good morning. What is it like? It's tomorrow, like midday in Japan right now, I think. Perhaps he's got the gamer lifestyle. So I don't think we're going to bother finishing the fun match. We got your bonus magic. But yeah, we had 7 real matches tonight, so I think we should definitely go ahead and get
them started.
Shuhei and Tom set up to play the first match. So anyone who is joining us, we can show you the bracket. While we get Shuhei and Tom set up, just to kind of remind you where we're at. This is the winner's bracket. David and Steven will be playing later tonight. Brian and Paul will be playing later tonight. But our first 3 matches are going to focus on the loser's bracket, where you can see we have, well, you will be able to see momentarily. We'll get the loser's bracket put up for you. There we go. Shuhei against Tom is the first match for this evening. Then we'll play Caleb versus Bob. Then the winner of Shuhei versus Tom will play against Kai. So all 3 of those are effectively their elimination matches. I mean, elimination isn't the end of the world. Like you, these guys the losers of these matches will be back next week to play the last chance qualifier for the 5th open seat in this season's Vintage Super League. But once we get through these 3 sort of pseudo elimination matches, then we get 4 consecutive win and ins.
That is going to be pretty exciting.
Yeah, no, this night is going to be fun. Already has been. That match was fun. Reed was so close, like 3 different times. He was just
true.
1 tiny resource away.
And Araya is one of those cards that, I mean, it's picking up popularity, but you see that as a combo player and you think, what? Is this seriously something that people are running now? But it's scary.
Oh, Reed's explaining in chat that turn where you gave him credit for trying to get Chromebox Force-a-Willed, he thought he was able to play Underground Sea. He thought he had the win.
Well, I thought that at first, too.
Yeah, it slipped his mind that he had started the turn by playing the Academy, so he thought he still had a land drop. In which case, yeah, he was just playing that Underground Sea would have been the second black, and he just hasn't. So then if he holds the Mana Crypt and the Chromox, like he's kicking himself for not having those 2 artifacts to generate Storm Count later.
It could have worked out very well if Rich had countered the Chromox. It could have actually worked out really well for him. But
it's true. No, I see your point. I may have to try that bluff sometime. All right, so this match we talked about a little bit earlier. Shuhei is on Oath of Druids. He's specifically on the Salvager's Oath list. So this is essentially the deck that Brian Kelly used to win the Vintage World Championships last fall. It is exactly the deck that Shuhei used to win the Asia Vintage Championship a couple of months ago. Steve Menendian got 3rd in that tournament as well. So Shuhei, this is his Vintage deck apparently. I don't know. I don't think he plays a ton of Vintage, but I mean, he clearly knows what he's doing. The guy's been playing Magic for a lot of years in a lot of formats. Shuhei will be playing against the Jeskai Mentor list for Tom Martell. So 2 of the regulars in Vintage nowadays. Mentor, if anything is the boogeyman in Vintage right now, it is this Mentor list. You should be prepared to play against this if you're going to a Vintage tournament nowadays. Hasn't been crushing in Magic Online in the last couple weeks. It feels like it's around in pretty much all the daily events that get their deck list posted to.
I think that depends on your definition of crushing. I think it's doing pretty well.
It is the most common deck to go 3-1 or better in Magic Online daily events. Yes. But it's not like, oh, look, another 4-0 Mentor deck. I feel like, sometimes it's the 4-0 deck or one of the couple of 4-0 decks, but it's doing well. It's around. You need to be prepared for it.
And people are still adjusting to it, as you've said.
I'm not quite. Oh, look, it crushed the Power 9. I'll give you that. It crushed the last Power 9 challenge, but I don't know that means it's going to crush the next one.
I can't argue with that.
So Tom versus Shuhei. We'll get our evening started momentarily. You asked me which match I was looking forward to. I said I want to see Rietzel. I want to see both Rietzel's deck and Rietzel the player. What's your favorite storyline for tonight? What are you most looking forward to?
We don't get to see Nick Koss again. Seeing him win on turn 2 with the Dragon combo against Paul, who had clearly never seen it before, right, which is understandable because most Vintage players have never seen it before. That was exciting to see. So it's sad to see that deck out for now.
Sure.
I want to see Dave Williams get vengeance. Team Indian for knocking me out tonight. But I'd be happy to see either. I'd be happy to see either of them in, or both of them in, because they still could both be in.
Yeah, we could definitely get both of them. One of them will get in from beating the other one, and then whoever loses that drops to the losers bracket. Dave's got a lot of people cheering for him. Steve does too, but I know not having Dave doing commentary last season was disappointing to many of our fans. One other thing I did want to talk about, we've got you in here. Tell us about the Mana Drain.
The Mana Drain.
Relatively recently purchased this, right?
Sure. Mana Drain is a Vintage website, probably the biggest English-speaking Vintage forum, just a discussion forum. It was started 15, 20 years ago. Well, not 20 years ago, but by a Vintage player. At some point, he sold it to Star City Games. Back when Star City Games was running large Vintage tournaments. They took good care of the site, but their priorities shifted from Vintage to gigantic standard tournaments, as they should have done that, right? They were so successful for them.
Fair.
So I recently bought the site and have been sort of updating it. And if you enjoy VSL, it's worth checking out. People can discuss the decks in more depth.
I agree. TheManaDrain.com is the place to be for Vintage conversations. But the place to be to watch Vintage is right here and right now. Enough of the preamble. Let us get down to the first official match of the night.